So a key location in both Halo 2 and Halo 3 ODST is New Mombasa, a massive African megacity on the east coast of the continent, but it's depicted fairly differently in between both ODST and Halo 2, so I figured today we could take a closer look at why it looks different and how that sort of factors into the canon. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So the City of New Mombasa is a major location in the opening of Halo 2, and it's one of the only settings of the game ODST, so it plays a pretty big role within Halo lore, and we get a pretty good look at the city in both depictions, however, it varies quite a bit. The city that we see in Halo 3 ODST is very different from the one we see in Halo 2. So why is that, and how does that make sense? Well, to understand this, we have to understand sort of the geography of the region and the layout of the city itself. The City of New Mombasa sits on an island across the river from the city of Old Mombasa. In Halo 2, when the campaign on the ground starts, we start in the Old Mombasa region of the area. We have to fight our way to one of the major bridges that crosses between Old Mombasa and New Mombasa. This is in fact one of the only bridges that connect the two sections of the city, and make our way across. It makes sense, by the way, this is a rather large river. When we get across to the other side, we see a very distinct type of architecture. A lot of square buildings with sharp angles and very distinctive shapes, albeit they're all very varied, and all the buildings are not quite skyscraper tall. They're shorter and squatter, with none of them even coming close to the height of, say, the infrastructure around the space elevator. So we fight through the city streets of New Mombasa, and we make our way over to the Scarab, where we are eventually picked up by a pelican, taken to the In Amber Clad, where we follow the Prophet of Regrets carrier through slipspace. Now, the New Mombasa depicted in ODST is very different. The New Mombasa depicted in ODST, well, we have a better top-down view of it, depicting it looking more like Manhattan from our world, is very architecturally distinctive from what we see in Halo 2. It lacks those square, boxy buildings that we see very present in the city center in Halo 2, instead having a lot of these sort of triangular buildings that are narrow and sharp and far taller than they are wide, giving the impression that they're much more impressive structures than those seen in Halo 2. This is a very different architectural style and a very different aesthetic for the city compared to what we saw in the previous game. So, why is that? Well, I'm gonna get the out-of-universe reason out of the way just to begin with. In Halo 2, New Mombasa was just one of many different set pieces that provided a backdrop for the beginning of the game, but never appeared again. However, in ODST, it was the setting for the entire game, and I would argue that the city itself is somewhat of a character, especially with the application of AI. So, the city in ODST needed a lot more work and a lot more detail that it didn't get in Halo 2. So if we had to pick in between which one is more canon, I would argue that the one depicted in ODST is more accurate to what was intended in the Halo universe, as it shows the city being given, the full spotlight. But there are ways that both of these versions can work together. After all, as I mentioned, the buildings that we see in Halo 2 tend to be kind of shorter and squatter, for lack of a better term. So perhaps this is a region of the city that is simply behind the skyscrapers. It makes sense as the bridge to the city crosses to the west of the city center that we see in ODST. So perhaps the downtown area that we're seeing in Halo 2 that we're fighting through with its shorter square buildings is this sort of, for lack of a better term, uptown area, which exists to the west of the city center, which is the cluster of very high skyscrapers that we see in ODST. So if I had to take a guess, and what I hold in my own personal headcanon, is that the city has a few distinct districts, as we see with most cities here in the real world. The upper city, if you will, which has shorter square buildings, is maybe an older element of the city, and not as old as Old Mombasa, mind you, but still older than the new city center, which was built sprouting off of that into the harbor. That new city center is the area that we explore in ODST, which makes a lot of sense because that region of the city feels far more planned and organized than what we see in Halo 2, which does feel more like a real city, which sprouted up over time. Basically, what I'm saying is it feels like the New Mombasa we explore in ODST is a planned extension on an existing city, which is the city that we see in Halo 2. Overall, though, I'm making some assumptions as to the way the city was laid out. We don't know this for sure, and it's perhaps intended that ODST is meant to retcon the architectural style of the city in its entirety. So I'm once again drawing some conclusions based on the information we have and the way Bungie seemed to approach the city when they were designing it so many years ago. New Mombasa is, however, a fascinating setting and played a crucial role in the Battle of Earth, and I've actually done an entire video on the way New Mombasa is laid out and the way it's handled, and if you'd like to learn about that, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think these are two distinct districts with different architectural styles, or do you think the city is intended to be entirely one way or the other, and the game's depictions are just off. And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Halo, you can leave that down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.